Alright, Math Easy family, let's find the domain of a square root function. We have to find the domain of f of x equals to square root of x plus 2. Now what does it mean by domain? Domain is all the acceptable input values that we can have for a function. This time we have a square root function. For the square root function, remember the radicand or the number that is inside of the square root sign can only have a positive value. It could only have a positive value. If it has a negative value, if we have a number such as -4 inside of the square root function, then there is no real solution. Now there will be an imaginary solution that we can discuss later in advanced algebra, but for now, if there is a negative number inside of a square root function, there is no real solution. And the reason is you cannot multiply or square any number to get -4. -2 times -2 will give you a +4, and +2 times +2 will also give you a +4. This applies to any even indexes in a radical sign. If you have an even index, then your radicand has to be a positive number. Let's learn with an example. F of x equals to square root of x plus 2. And as discussed, we want this expression to remain positive. So we have to find all the possible values of x that could remain this function as a positive function. So what could be those values of x? Let me start by creating a 0 value, because square root of 0 is acceptable. It gives us a real solution. How can I make this as a 0? So if I substitute -2 in place of x, then it makes my expression 0. Once I make it 0, then I can play around and see what happens if I take a value which is less than -2, and what happens if I take a value which is greater than -2. Let's take a less than value, x equals to -3. If I substitute x equals to -3, then it gives me a square root of -3 plus 2 would be square root of -1. And as discussed, we cannot have a negative number inside of a square root radical. It doesn't give us a real solution, so this is not an acceptable input. Now I'm going to check for a value which is greater than -2. So I'm rewriting my expression, square root of x plus 2, and a greater than value is -1. If I put that value in, it gives me +1, which is an acceptable value, and it gives us a real solution. So I can safely say that the domain for this function would be all the numbers which are greater than -2. Choosing those numbers gives us a positive radicand and keeps our solution a real number. So x greater than -2. I hope this was helpful. Like and subscribe my channel.